You are listening to The Real Men Feel Show with Andy Grant. Real Men Feel encourages men to allow and express all of their emotions. Despite what you may have been taught, all emotions do serve you. Real Men Feel is committed to engaging in discussions that most men aren't having, but you don't need to be a man to join us. The Real Men Feel Show is produced weekly for your growth and enjoyment. Listen to us on podcast platforms including iTunes, Google Play, Stitcher, and many more. You can also watch the show on YouTube by visiting realmenfeel.org/YouTube. Come back often and feel free to add the podcast to your favorite RSS feed or subscribe on iTunes by visiting realmenfeel.org/iTunes. You can follow us on Twitter at realmenfeelorg and at facebook.com/realmenfeelshow. All links mentioned in each episode are in the show notes found on the blog at realmenfeel.org. Real Men Feel is brought to you by the Good Men Project. Visit goodmenproject.com for more of the conversations no one else is having. Your reviews, comments, feedback, and participation are welcome during the live show and anytime in our Facebook group, on Twitter, or at realmenfeel.org. Now, let's get into this week's show. Hello and welcome to another edition of Real Men Feel. This is your host, Andy Grant. And, September, maybe you don't know, September is National Suicide Prevention Month here in the United States. And September 10th was World Suicide Prevention Day, which actually strikes me as a little bit odd. I think we should prevent suicide every day. It shouldn't be just assigned to one day, but I digress. I've shared my experiences with depression and suicide attempts many times in the show and in my writings. And I've also lost family members to suicide. My grandfather and my great-grandmother both killed themselves. And I lost my dad just last July, and he succumbed to cancer, but had lots of suicidal talk plans. And, if he had taken his own life, it wouldn't have been that big of a shock to me. But with all that said, I really wanted to do some more to bring the stigma of suicide into light, to get more people talking about it, to realize that it is preventable, and just to get more open dialogue. That's the big part of why I started the show. And today I'm really grateful to have a guest who, unfortunately, is a member of a club that nobody wants to be in. He's a survivor of suicide, meaning he's lost a loved one to suicide. But I'm pleased to welcome mental health advocate Zak Williams. How you doing, Zak?
Hi, I'm doing pretty well. It's a sunny day in Los Angeles, and the day started off right. So I'm happy to be here and to be speaking with you.
Awesome. And so it's been just over 4 years since you lost your dad to suicide. Is that right?
Yes, that's correct.
Yeah. And is that something growing up that were you kind of concerned that might happen, or was just a complete shock out of the blue for you?
Oh, it was out of the blue. He had been struggling with depression and pretty severe anxiety throughout most of his life. And later on in life, he received a neurodegenerative disease diagnosis, starting with Parkinson's. And, after his passing, it's found out that he had Lewy body dementia. And so I'm not sure what role that played within him taking his own life, but it certainly, I think, magnified his feelings in terms of, how he was dealing with his own depression. And I think in general, it was very challenging for him to experience kind of the day-to-day struggles associated with depression, and also feeling isolated with his diagnosis and so forth.
So when you were growing up, were the issues of anxiety and depression, were they talked about openly, or was it all just kind of, did you keep it quiet?
A little bit. I think he was very focused on his career and in entertaining. He was a comedian and actor and entertainer, and so he very much wanted to continue to be able to perform and please his audience and make them laugh and so he wasn't terribly open about his struggles specifically with depression.
So as, as kids, we're really perceptive. So could you kind of know that that Dad's not right today, or could you kind of read his mood better than whatever, despite any mask he might put on?
Yes, and my siblings, my family, and I were always made it very clear that we were there for him. But he was very good at putting his best face on when it came to dealing with his day-to-day struggles.
Yeah, cool. And I wonder, at what age did you realize that kind of your dad's job and lifestyle was different than most families?
Oh, at a very early age, and since kind of my earliest memories, it had been kind of unusual to be dealing with and experiencing a very public figure as a parent. And I wouldn't say I thought of. I mean, for me, it was normal, but because I grew up in San Francisco and I didn't grow up around kind of the media and entertainment world, my day-to-day life was pretty normal. And then when it came to dealing with kind of more the entertainment celebrity world, that was unusual to me.
So did that let's see, did that make growing up the kind of and I know you can't compare it to growing up some other way, but did that bring its own challenges for you, that public spotlight?
Well, sure. When you're the son of a public figure, it's hard to reconcile being able to share your time with the public. That's not the easiest thing, and especially as you're growing up and wanting a parent there for you at all times, and that wasn't always the case.
Yeah.
So,
and
there was, when he was present, it was he was very present. But again, there's the sharing component that wasn't always easy.
So did you feel like you had a close relationship, but then there was also just the pulls of kind of everything else?
We were very close.
Yeah, cool. Awesome. And your dad had a lot of public challenges with addiction as well. Were you kind of aware of that? Was that talked about at all when you were growing up?
Well, when I was growing up, he was not active in using at all. So when he did start using again, I was a young adult, and during that time it was very clear. But from early childhood on through my teens up to adulthood, it was not an issue. I knew that he didn't use and had used substances in the past, but it's not something that we witnessed or experienced as a family. He was fantastic as a dad, present and affectionate and considerate throughout my childhood.
Cool. And there's a recent documentary that came out in July, I believe, "Come Inside My Head."
Mm-hmm.
And I saw a line from you in that. You're talking about that your dad didn't always feel successful, but to you, he was the most successful person that you knew.
Yes.
So I wonder, did you define success or see success in a way differently than he did?
No. Well, actually, yeah. I think for him, success was very much based upon validation. And so it's not necessarily about money or fame. It's about whether he's able to delight and please his audience. And if he felt like he wasn't doing that, then he would have a tough time.
Mm. And growing up, being his son, when he was having a tough time, how did that affect you? Like, did you notice, or was he did you kind of only see him when he was like at his best and able to portray himself at his best, or what was that like?
No, we saw him. I saw him throughout the spectrum of his moods and emotions. Um, so um, it was hard to see him struggle at times, especially when he felt like he wasn't pleasing or exciting or delighting his audience, whether it came down to a film or performing. And so if a film wasn't performing well, or he performed and he felt like he wasn't engaging his audience, that would be really tough for him, as it is for many entertainers. It's not unique.
Right.
It's just, I think, in many ways, there are different modes of success. There's, financial gain, there's notoriety, there's fame, but in the sense of, an entertainer who really wants to go out and engage an audience, their audience, it can be really challenging when that audience might not respond in the way that you want them to respond.
And in your own life and in your growing up in adulthood and jobs and career choices, you never played with an idea of going into entertainment, or did you?
A little bit. Yeah. I did take acting classes and did explore it, but my career, my background is in business and technology and media. And so, so that's what I felt. I felt more comfortable behind the scenes developing marketing products than I did out in front of the camera.
Yeah. And was that consciously at all due to kind of seeing his struggle with that, again, that need, that quest for validation? Did that affect you in terms of how you wanted to, with the choices you made?
Not necessarily. I appreciate math and numbers and things like product development and marketing and business development. And so when it comes to doing stuff I love, it more so relates to developing and building experiences and products.
So we talked about how the celebrity aspect of growing up and how you realized kind of that was different and kind of had the a bit of push and pull dealing with the public. So, and again, there's no way to compare this, but did the celebrity part of your dad's life, did that make his passing harder?
Well, it made it challenging. I mean, it's hard. The passing of anyone is hard, so the thing that I felt was, I don't want to call it unique to my experience, but specific to my experience, was having to share the mourning with both in the public sphere and also privately with my family and friends and loved ones. So, so often, and I've spoken with people who've experienced similar situations. The private and public mourning can kind of become enmeshed, and it can become very difficult to tease those two apart. And when it comes to grieving publicly and sharing your experience with people who adored and loved and appreciated your parent in a specific way, on screen or on stage, and then dealing with the grieving in a private sphere, they're two different things.
Yeah.
And I didn't really understand that until a couple of years after my dad's passing. And
Yeah.
so separating the two of those situations of grieving was something that I didn't do initially. And it was very hard because I was like, we want to, I wanted to be there for people who were clearly suffering, you know, his fans, etc. But that's not really my place in a lot of ways. I need to be there for my family. And so it's, that dichotomy was sometimes challenging to reconcile. And so it's like I said, it's not a unique situation, but it's a very specific situation relative to the passing of a public figure.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, because and again, it's something you can only kind of experience. You can only explain once you've experienced it and lived through it. So it's interesting that it took years for you to see the separation that was needed, and even sounds like your father's desire to always kind of please the audience was kind of passed on, and that you were attempting to please his fans even in your own period of mourning.
Well, I wouldn't necessarily call it pleasing. I would more so frame it as I have empathy and understanding of what his fans were going through.
Gotcha.
And wanted to share in that empathy and understanding. But when it came to grieving as a family, it's a different thing. Yeah. It's a completely different thing, and I didn't initially understand that.
Mm. And from talking to others who have lost people to suicide, dying by suicide, it somehow makes it different as well. Could you feel that at all? Did you notice that?
Yeah, I think it was confusing for many people. Personally, I've struggled with depression and anxiety, and so I have some understanding of what he was going through, but I think there's just so many unanswered questions, and that can be challenging. The whys of it, the what could I have done, the how can I have been more supportive for him, and there are some regrets, but I'm also very thankful to be part of a community of suicide survivors who can be supportive of one another. And I think it's really important to bring up the issue relating to suicide prevention right now at this point in time, because it seems like we have a bit of an epidemic on our hands relating to mental health and mental wellness and people feeling isolated. And I think it's really important to help develop, foster, and support communities that are there for both suicide survivors and people who are impacted in the greater community by tragic events. And I feel that we need to talk about mental health and mental wellness and bring it to the front of public dialogue and discourse, because it's just very clear to me that considerations associated with mental health need to be addressed often and addressed early on. And people suffering alone and in isolation is just not acceptable. We really need to be able to help develop and foster support communities.
Yep. Couldn't agree more. And that's why I'm so grateful that you're willing to come, and that you're willing to speak and share your story and your experiences as much as you do. Because when I was I was 17 years old and in my first mental hospital after a suicide attempt, and nobody talked about it except for other kids in the hospital. So that just made me feel even more broken and messed up. Like, this is not something that normal people, these aren't ideas normal people have, and happy people were so much different than I was. And part of why I, as an adult, started telling my story more and more was because, even as a kid, I didn't see anyone that ever talked about having kind of dealt with suicidal ideation and even attempts and coming through the other end and being a happy grown-up after that fact. And I didn't know that was a possibility. But I would love to talk about how the community that you did found. So you did reach out and you did found some local support from other suicide survivors.
Yes, I have. I have. I just moved from San Francisco to Los Angeles, but in San Francisco, there's a great community of survivors who are extremely supportive of one another, and also very proactive in sharing and developing supporting resources. Um, so, in my mind, it's important to engage the topic around mental health and suicide ideation early. If someone is feeling it, they need to feel like they are supported and can be open about what they're struggling with. And I think the earlier in life someone can feel comfortable in sharing and discussing what they're going through, the more opportunities there are for interventions and support.
Mm-hmm. Yep, couldn't agree more.
Yeah, so I'm involved with an organization called Bring Change to Mind, which is a nonprofit focused on addressing and removing the stigma associated with mental health and mental wellness.
Cool.
And part of what they do, a big part of what they do, is facilitating and developing support groups and communities in high schools and universities throughout the USA. And it's become very clear that those discussions and communities that are developed earlier on in someone's life has proven to be a pillar of support and empathy and understanding. And that's key.
Yeah. I find time and time again in my own life and in people I've talked with, that the willingness of one person to share what's going on for them gives everyone else that permission to go, oh, me too. And I felt that. And, I got through that. And that the supportive community is something that we just keep losing with technology, with isolation, with people relying on social media as opposed to actual, face-to-face real media, I guess, or lack of a better term. That's where, the most support comes from. And, the ability to be just listened to and not have someone run away. I know that was a big thing that I was afraid of as a kid, that someone would find out that I'm, had these self-destructive thoughts and they wouldn't be my friend anymore or something like that. But, and especially true for men, that did this, the notion of the mask and just pretending everything's all right, even when it's totally not, and, couldn't be further from the truth. But this stubborn streak of refusing to admit it. But when we do, like there's support, there's comfort, there's help that can be there. There's resources.
Absolutely. And I think, you mentioned the mask and the especially amongst men, the facade that we put up, and it can be very challenging to break through that facade or to open up and expose oneself. And I think the dynamic is changing for the better in terms of people feeling more comfortable and opening up, but it needs to be continued, sustained effort.
You mentioned Bring Change to Mind.
Mm-hmm.
So, and you actually co-founded that, correct?
No, I didn't co-found.
Oh, that's what the says you did.
No. It was co-founded by Glenn Close and a woman named Pamela Harrington. Glenn Close, the actor, and Pamela Harrington is a mental health advocate and nonprofit executive.
Excellent. So where can people find out more information about them and the resources they're offering?
Sure. So Bring Change to Mind's resources can be found at bringchangetomind.org. That's Bring Change 2 is in the number 2 mind.org.
Excellent.
Yeah. And so there's PSAs, there's all sorts of information around the curricula that are provided for students and facilitators. There's a lot there.
Cool. Excellent. Great one. And we'll share that in the show notes. Wherever you're listening to the show, you'll find a link to that as well if you're not catching it just listening. And you had mentioned your own challenges with depression and anxiety, and I wonder if there's anything you'd like to share about what's helped you the most in dealing with that.
Sure. I managed to treat and support my. Well, sorry. Can we start that again?
Sure.
Yeah. Sorry. I just want to be very specific in how I respond.
It's fine. Yep. Pick it up when you're ready.
So I managed to treat my anxiety and depression through a healthy diet, some exercise, therapy and support groups are great. And, I try to take supplements, make sure that I have appropriate vitamins and things like that. But I don't take medication specifically for it.
Great. So you've just found that, again, not treating your mental health as it's some other foreign part of you, just taking care of all of you, helps alleviate some of those issues.
Well, yeah, I think sometimes one can feel like there's a catch-all, that a pill will solve everything, and I really don't think that's the case. I think that it requires human connection, requires not loading one's body with fat and sugar and alcohol or whatever it may be. It's all, those are all forms of medication, just different types of medication. So I believe in balance. I believe in human connection. I believe in participating in communities and being open and receiving help when needed. So there's not some secret catch-all for me. It just involves kind of a conscious, specific approach to managing my lifestyle.
Great. And so I know after you lost your dad that you did find support in funny, you found support in support groups, just like they're meant to. But I wonder if there's anything that you wish people that haven't had that experience could understand about losing your dad to suicide.
Can you be more specific?
Yeah, like what specifically can kind of be gained from that support group of people that have lived through that experience that other people aren't getting? And maybe there's nothing, but is there something that you wish people understood about the impact on you when you lose a parent to suicide?
Well, I don't think it's just specific to losing a parent to suicide. I think it can relate to a number of traumatic events. But for people who have experienced traumas, it's important to not feel isolated and alone in your experience. So in sharing your story or hearing the stories of others, you can develop a shared understanding of what it is that you've gone through, what other people have gone through, and know that there are similarities and differences, but in each consideration, those can be talked through and people can feel heard, and just as I felt heard.
Yeah. I know in my own situation, so, I was an adult when my grandfather ended his life, and he had been held up to me as an example of someone that overcame depression, and what a great model it was for you. So when he did end his life, a lot of them, I took it personally, like it was like somehow like an assault. And I've heard that from other people, and that's, again, it's like every death, any death can be tragic and a surprise, but somehow suicide it brings like an extra gut punch to it, I find. Is that kind of match your experience at all?
Yeah, I mean, there's elements of anger associated with it, tied into grief and frustration, both in my own actions and feeling like I was helpless at times, and also in being aggravated with all the questions that were out there that feel unanswered. So that's challenging.
Yeah. And have those kind of thoughts and the what ifs and why didn't I's and those sort of things, have those faded away?
No, I mean, they come at a different cadence. You know, when it first happens, when you're in the middle, in the thick of things, and there's all these emotions, especially dysregulated emotions, you're like a cork on an ocean, you know, and it's very hard to control one's feelings. And I'm not saying that one needs to, but over time, it becomes more of a, you know, the waves come, and I'm very fortunate to have prioritized trying to take care of myself and my well-being, and that's an everyday process. You know, like I said, there's no catch-all, there's no magic pill, but the seas have calmed a bit, and it enables me to be introspective and thoughtful, kind of how I went about, you know, the process, both the grieving process, but also my actions relating to taking care of myself and supporting others. You know, when you're in the thick of things and when the seas are roiling, it's really hard to take a step back and say, hey, what can I do to support myself?
Right. And
I think often that's lost in the mix. And I feel like in this day and age, we feel I'm just going to speak for myself.
Mm-hmm.
I would feel that, you know, there was all these things that were meant to fill a hole in me. So, you know, food, you know, relationships, alcohol, drugs, whatever it may be, they're meant to fill a hole that I was that felt something that was lacking in me. And as I start kind of peeling away the layers and realizing what does that hole actually look like, it's actually, it can't be filled by just inputting, by just eating and drinking and all those things. It requires kind of a deeper connection to oneself and to others. And that's what I found to be most healing throughout this process.
Yeah, I find that when you're trying to put other things in that inner hole, it just falls right through. That the hole stays, right? It's only,
let's call it a void.
Yeah, good. Yeah, the void remains, and the only thing that really heals it is that introspection. It's for me, it's you know, being willing to feel the pain that void is, or what it's trying to hide. That's when it could finally close for me.
Yeah. So I don't know. It sounds like you've had a similar experience, but you know, everyone's experience is specific and unique in many aspects. And the key thing is finding those commonalities and really understanding what it is that we share as humans.
Right. Yeah, because it's a lot.
Yeah. But the key thing is, you know, and again, I'll refer to the void. I think the void is the best term for it. Is that, you know, we're all seeking fixes, and there's not a quick fix. I don't think there will ever be. And so relative to that, it's important to really understand that it's a long, sustained process and continuous road and journey.
Cool. And now 4 years later, are there still things that catch you by surprise in having your own dad gone?
Yeah, I mean, feelings and emotions crop up at the oddest times, you know, and it just, you have to feel them.
Right. Yeah. I mean, that's what's behind the naming of this show. And that's what I find in my life. Like when I'm willing to feel whatever emotion is, the moment it pops up, it passes easier and quicker than I ever would have imagined, as opposed to trying to deny it or stuff it or decide this isn't the right time or place for this feeling to be here. Is that kind of jibe with your experience at all?
Yeah. I think the key thing is also finding kind of safe places that one can feel comfortable in sharing and finding kind of peace and serenity in those places. If you don't have that, then I would encourage you to find places that feel safe and serene. I'm not referring to you specifically, but just in general.
I appreciate that. Cool. Are there any other ways prior to your dad's death that suicide had impacted your life?
Yeah. So my cousin took his life when I was 12 years old.
Oh, wow.
He was a close friend of mine, and so that was my first real personal exposure to suicide, and that was really challenging to deal with as a early adolescence, pre-adolescent. I don't know.
Right.
So
We,
that was kind of first exposure, and that was really hard.
were you able to talk to someone at that time? Did you seek support and get help then?
Not in the way I should have, but as a 12-year-old, you're still trying to figure out a lot.
Yeah. Yeah.
So no, I didn't get the support that I feel like in hindsight I should have received.
So ideally, if someone's in that situation, if someone has their child and someone in their circle has taken their own life, what would you encourage the parents to do for that person?
I would encourage them to be proactive in providing resources focused on support and therapy and receiving the appropriate help, because otherwise, especially adolescents, young people, they can isolate, and it can be a very alienating experience. And the key thing is to ensure that they feel loved and supported, and that they have a path to healing and community.
Awesome. And I imagine it would have been pretty easy for you to kind of coast through life as celebrity party boy, or you probably grew up a little bit premature to miss, like, just to live on social media and everything. But yeah, I'm real impressed, talking to you and the way that you encourage others to seek help and the kind of work you've done. And I saw something else online that you were teaching classes at San Quentin at one time.
Oh, I have in the past. Yes. Yeah, volunteering and service work are important to me. And I feel that, relative to financial literacy, having an understanding of one's own finances and relationship with money is really important, as a lot of people have challenging relationships with both.
Yeah, indeed. Yeah.
Oh yeah, sorry.
No, yeah, I was gonna say, like, yeah, economics and financial things are often, a trigger for depression and suicide, as again, especially among men as well. So, yeah. So, it's, you're working there, your work there with financial literacy was, almost helping the same overall cause.
I mean, they're related. People have a very interesting relationship with money and finances, and their personal finances. But no, I think service work and volunteering and contributing to the greater good is it's part of my healing process and recovery process, and it's helped me cope with trauma and helping others. I found to be helping me in the long run. So, relative to me being a party boy, there again, that's feeding the void in a specific way, and it's not fulfilling. And at the end of the day, I find meaningful work important.
Yeah, and that's a big thing. For depression, anxiety, and that void is a sense of meaninglessness. So yeah, so I find when you can take the focus off of ourselves and onto someone else, that helps. The like the repetitious thoughts and the churning mind of I'm not good enough, I can't do this, nothing works out, all that kind of crap in my own head. When I focus on someone else and what can I do for someone else, then that stuff all dissolved, at least for a little while.
Yeah. Well, I think quieting the mind and finding kind of a peaceful place in one's own head is important. I think something I don't do enough of is exercise. I always find that helps, but shoulda, woulda, coulda. I feel that just getting out there and walking and getting sun, or just being out in nature is really important as well.
Awesome. Well, cool. Well, I know you've got a lot going on, and I appreciate you making the time to talk about this. And in case someone hasn't figured out, your dad was Robin Williams, and I hope that the love and appreciation and affection that the world still really has for him, reaches you and still positively affects your family, and that some of that can help alleviate the pain of his loss.
Thank you. I really appreciate it. And it's a privilege to be able to be speaking to you today, and it's important. And, I value what you're doing. I feel that you're bringing hope and healing to people, and speaking with them and sharing their stories.
Awesome. Thanks again for joining us, and everyone else, thanks for tuning in. Wherever you're catching Real Men Feel, please give a share, a rating, a review, give us some feedback. We'd love to hear from you, and be good to yourself. Thank you for listening to Real Men Feel. Reach out to us at realmenfeel@gmail.com. Learn more about Andy Grant at theandygrant.com. Until next time, visit realmenfeel.org or the Real Men Feel Facebook group and share what you thought of this episode. Please give this podcast a review on iTunes, Google Play, or wherever you are discovering Real Men Feel. Visit goodmenproject.com for more of the conversations no one else is having.